The gun was small. A snub-nose .38 revolver, chrome-plated, the kind that disappears into a jacket pocket but leaves a hole the size of a fist when it exits. Carmine, the bull, Rossetti held it casually, like it was just another piece of jewelry, another symbol of the power he wielded over Las Vegas. Muhammad Ali looked at the gun, then at Rossetti, then back at the gun. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there in his white satin shorts, his hands wrapped in tape, 45 minutes away from a fight that was supposed to define his comeback. You understand what I'm telling you? Rossetti's voice was quiet, almost friendly. That was the thing about really dangerous men. They didn't need to yell. You take a dive in the 7th round. You make it look good. And you walk out of here tonight with your pretty face intact. It was March 1976, and Muhammad Ali was in the MGM Grand's backstage area, preparing to fight a contender named Jimmy Young. Ali was 34 years old, coming off a brutal loss to Ken Norton, trying to prove he still belonged at the top of the heavyweight division. He needed this win. Everyone knew it. Carmine Rossetti knew it too, and he was betting $500,000 that Ali would lose. The cramped dressing room suddenly felt smaller. Angelo Dundee, Ali's longtime trainer, stood frozen by the door. Two of Rossetti's men blocked the exit. Thick-necked guys in expensive suits with the dead eyes of men who'd done things they'd never talk about. Outside, they could hear the muffled roar of the crowd filling the arena. 12,000 people, waiting for a show, expecting a fight. They had no idea the real fight was happening right here, in a room that smelled of liniment and fear. "Mr. Rossetti," Ali said, and his voice carried that same calm confidence he'd shown in every ring he'd ever entered. "You need to put that gun away and get out of my dressing room." Rossetti smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "I don't think you understand how this works, champ. See, I own this town. I own the judges. I own half the boxers fighting tonight. And I own you, at least for the next 2 hours. What happened next will become one of the most dangerous moments of Muhammad Ali's life. But it would also reveal something about the champion that no boxing ring could ever show. Not his speed, not his power, not his ability to take punishment, but his refusal to be broken by anything. Not governments, not illness, and certainly not men with guns. Because Muhammad Ali had faced every kind of opponent in his career. He'd fought the toughest boxers in the world. He'd fought the U.S. government and gone to the Supreme Court. He'd fought racism, injustice, and his own doubts. But he'd never faced someone like Carmine Rossetti, a man who believed that money and violence could control anything. A man who'd built an empire on breaking people who wouldn't bend. A man who was about to learn that some people don't break, no matter what you threaten them with. To understand what brought Carmine Rossetti to Ali's dressing room that night, you need to understand who he was. Rossetti wasn't just another mobster. He was one of the last of the old-school mob bosses who'd built Las Vegas from desert sand and illegal money. He'd come up through the ranks in the 1950s, working for the families that controlled the casinos, the unions, the politicians. By 1976, Rossetti controlled a significant piece of the city's sports betting operations. Boxing was his specialty. He'd fixed fights before, small-time matches, preliminary bouts where nobody looked too closely. But fixing a Muhammad Ali fight? That would be the crown jewel of his career. The ultimate proof that Carmine Rossetti could control anything, even the most famous athlete in the world. He bet $500,000, borrowed from East Coast families, on Jimmy Young to win. But the odds weren't in his favor. Ali was a 4-1 favorite. Even at 34, even coming off a loss, people still believed in Muhammad Ali, which meant Rossetti needed insurance. He needed to make absolutely certain that Ali didn't win. So he'd walked into Ali's dressing room 45 minutes before the fight with 2 bodyguards and a gun. This was supposed to be simple. Every fighter had a price. Every man had something he feared losing more than he wanted to win. Rossetti just needed to find Ali's price and make him understand the consequences of refusing. But as he stood there, watching Muhammad Ali look at his gun with something that wasn't quite contempt, but wasn't fear either, Rossetti began to realize he'd miscalculated. This wasn't going to be simple at all. "Do you know who I am?" Rossetti asked, his tone hardening. "I know exactly who you are," Ali replied. "You're a man who thinks he can threaten me. You're a man who thinks that gun makes you powerful. You're a man who's about to learn that you made a very big mistake. One of Rossetti's bodyguards shifted uncomfortably. Angelo Dundee made a small sound in his throat, something between a gasp and a prayer. Because everyone in that room, except Rossetti, understood what was happening. Muhammad Ali wasn't backing down. He was escalating. And when Muhammad Ali escalated, things got very interesting. Rossetti's smile disappeared. You think this is a joke? You think I won't use this? He raised the gun slightly, pointing it more directly at Ali's chest. I think, Ali said, stepping forward, actually stepping toward the gun, that you came in here expecting to scare me. You thought you'd wave that little toy around, talk tough, and I'd just fold up and do whatever you wanted. But you made a mistake, Mr. Rossetti. A big one. What mistake is that? You forgot who you're threatening. Ali's voice dropped lower, that dangerous edge creeping in that his opponents knew meant trouble. I'm Muhammad Ali. I fought Sonny Liston when everyone said he'd kill me. I refused to go to Vietnam when they threatened me with prison. I lost everything, my title, my license, my ability to make a living, and I still didn't back down. You really think a man like that is going to be scared of you and your gun? Rossetti's jaw tightened. His finger moved closer to the trigger. I could kill you right now. Right here. Your fancy words won't stop a bullet. You could, Ali agreed. You could pull that trigger, and you'd kill the heavyweight champion of the world 45 minutes before his fight. And then what? You think you'd walk out of this casino? You think 12,000 people out there wouldn't tear you apart? You think the FBI wouldn't be all over you before the sun comes up? He took another step forward. Now the gun was almost touching his chest. So go ahead, pull the trigger. But understand something. You won't leave this building alive. And even if you did, you'd spend the rest of your life as the man who murdered Muhammad Ali. That's what you'd be known for. Not a powerful boss. Not a man who controlled Las Vegas. Just a coward who shot an unarmed fighter. The silence in the room was absolute. One of the bodyguards actually took a step back. Angelo Dundee had gone pale. And Carmine Rossetti, for the first time in maybe 20 years, didn't know what to do. He'd threatened hundreds of people in his life. Fighters, casino owners, politicians, businessmen. They'd all folded. All of them. Because everyone has something they're afraid of losing. But Muhammad Ali was standing there, inches from his gun, completely unafraid. And that didn't make sense. That violated the fundamental rule of power that Rossetti had built his empire on. Everyone breaks if you push hard enough. Except Muhammad Ali wasn't breaking. He was pushing back. Let me tell you what's really going to happen. Ali continued, his voice steady and cold. I'm going to walk out of this dressing room in 40 minutes. I'm going to get in that ring. And I'm going to fight Jimmy Young with everything I have. I'm going to win or lose based on what I do in that ring. Not based on what some two-bit gangster with a gun told me to do. Because that's what champions do. We fight our own fights. We don't let anyone else control us. Rossetti's hand trembled. Just slightly. But Ali saw it. Everyone saw it. The gun was still pointed at Ali's chest, but the power dynamic had shifted. Somehow, impossibly, the man with the weapon wasn't the one in control anymore. You're making a very bad decision, Rossetti said, but his voice had lost its edge. I have friends. Powerful friends. They can make your life very difficult. My life has always been difficult. Ali shot back. I grew up black in Louisville, Kentucky. I won an Olympic gold medal and came home to a country that wouldn't serve me in restaurants. I became heavyweight champion and they tried to draft me into a war I didn't believe in. I lost 3.5 years of my prime because I stood up for my principles. You think your powerful friends scare me? Ali moved even closer. Now his chest was actually touching the barrel of the gun. Here's what you need to understand, Mr. Rossetti. I've spent my whole life fighting people who thought they could control me. The government, boxing commissions, promoters, racists, and I beat all of them. Not with violence, not with threats, but by refusing to be anything less than who I am. So you and your gun? You're just another bully who thinks power comes from fear. But real power, true power, comes from standing up for what's right even when someone's pointing a gun at your chest. Something strange was happening. Rossetti's bodyguards were looking at each other, uncertainty in their eyes. Angelo Dundee had stopped praying and started watching with something like amazement. And Carmine Rossetti, one of the most feared men in Las Vegas, was beginning to realize that he'd walked into a situation he couldn't control. "You want me to lose this fight?" Ollie asked. "You want me to embarrass myself in front of 12,000 people? You want me to betray everything I believe in, everything I've fought for, everything I am, because you made a bad bet?" "It's not just about the money," Rossetti said, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. "Then what's it about?" Rossetti didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because the truth was, it was only about the money, about maintaining his reputation as someone who could control outcomes, about proving that he was powerful enough to make even Muhammad Ali do what he wanted. But standing there, with his gun pressed against Ali's chest, Rossetti was beginning to understand that he'd miscalculated everything. Power didn't come from guns or threats or borrowed money from East Coast families. Power came from being willing to die for what you believed in. And Muhammad Ali was standing there, completely willing to take a bullet rather than compromise who he was. That was real power, and Rossetti had never encountered it before. Muhammad Ali took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't defiant. It was something else, something that sounded almost like compassion. "Mr. Rossetti, can I ask you something?" Rossetti blinked, surprised by the shift in tone. "What? Why'd you really come here tonight? And don't tell me it's about the money. $500,000 is a lot, but a man like you can make that back. So what is it really about?" For a long moment, Rossetti didn't answer. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. Not all the way, just enough that it wasn't pointed directly at Ali's heart anymore. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." Rossetti's jaw worked. His eyes, for just a second, showed something other than cold calculation. Something vulnerable. "I'm 58 years old. I've been doing this for 35 years. I've built an empire. I've got power, money, respect. But you know what I don't have? I don't have anyone who actually respects me. They fear me. They obey me because they're scared of what I'll do if they don't. But respect? Real respect? The kind you have? I've never had that." Ollie nodded slowly. "So, you came here to prove you could control me. You thought if you could make Muhammad Ali do what you wanted, that would somehow give you the respect you're looking for." "Maybe." Rossetti's voice was quiet now, almost defeated. "But that's not how respect works," Ollie said gently. "You can't force it. You can't buy it. You can't threaten someone into respecting you. Respect comes from how you treat people, from standing for something bigger than yourself, from being willing to sacrifice for what's right." He gestured around the dressing room. "Look at Angelo over there. He's worked with me for 15 years. You know why? Not because I pay him the most, not because I threaten him, but because we respect each other. We're in this together. That's real power, Mr. Rossetti. The power that comes from genuine relationships, not fear." Rossetti looked at Angelo, who nodded slightly. Then he looked back at Ollie. "So what am I supposed to do?" "I've got $500,000 bet on this fight. Money I borrowed. If I lose it, then you lose it," Ollie said simply. "You take the loss. You face the consequences of your actions like a man. And maybe, just maybe, you start living differently. Stop trying to control everything. Stop thinking that violence and threats are the answer to every problem. Start building something real instead of something built on fear." The gun was now pointing at the floor. Rossetti's whole posture had changed. He suddenly looked older, smaller, tired. "You make it sound easy. It's not easy," Ollie admitted. "Doing the right thing is never easy. That's why so few people do it. But it's the only thing that matters in the end. When you're lying on your deathbed, looking back at your life, you won't remember how many people feared you. You'll remember whether you stood for something meaningful, whether you treated people with dignity, whether you were a man worth respecting." Carmine Rossetti stood there, the gun hanging loose in his hand, his whole empire of threats and violence suddenly feeling hollow. He'd built his entire life on the idea that power came from controlling others, from making people fear him. But Muhammad Ali had just shown him something he'd never seen before, someone completely unafraid, someone who valued his principles more than his life. And it broke something in Rossetti, some fundamental belief that he'd carried for 35 years. "I don't know how to be that person," Rossetti said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "I don't know how to be the kind of man you're talking about. I've done too many things, hurt too many people. It's never too late to change, Ollie said. Look at me. I was Cassius Clay, a kid who talked too much, who cared more about being famous than being meaningful. Then I became Muslim, changed my name, stood up to the government. I became someone different, better. Not perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes, but better. You can do the same. Rossetti looked at the gun in his hand like he was seeing it for the first time. Then, slowly, he handed it to one of his bodyguards. Take this. Get rid of it. The bodyguard took the gun, exchanging a confused glance with his partner. They'd never seen their boss like this. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost human. Rossetti turned back to Ollie. What you said about respect, you're right. I've spent my whole life trying to get it the wrong way, trying to take it instead of earn it. And all it's gotten me is a life where everyone around me is either scared or bought. I don't have any real friends. I don't have anyone I can trust. I just have employees and people who owe me. It's not too late to change that, Ollie repeated. What should I do? About the bet. Ollie shrugged. That's your decision. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk out of here, get in that ring, and fight my heart out. Whatever happens, happens. If I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. But it'll be real. It'll be honest. And I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror tomorrow morning and know I didn't compromise who I am. Rossetti nodded slowly. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He extended his hand to Muhammad Ali. I'm sorry for coming here, for threatening you, for thinking I could make you into something you're not. You're a better man than I'll ever be. Ali took his hand. They shook. And in that handshake was an understanding that transcended the violence and threats of the past 30 minutes. You can be better, Ali said. You just have to choose to be. Every day, every moment. You choose whether you're going to be the man with the gun or the man with integrity. Rossetti held Ali's gaze for a long moment. Then he turned to his bodyguards. We're leaving. And when we get outside, you're going to call the bookies. We're pulling all our bets. Every single one. I don't care about the penalties. We're done fixing fights. The bodyguards looked at each other in disbelief, but they nodded. They followed Rossetti toward the door. Before he left, Rossetti turned back one more time. Ali, yeah, win this fight. Not for me. Not because I threatened you, but because you're the greatest, and the world needs to remember that. Then Carmine Rossetti walked out of Muhammad Ali's dressing room and never fixed another fight again. Muhammad Ali fought Jimmy Young that night. It wasn't his best performance. He was rusty, older, not quite the fighter he'd once been. The fight went the full 15 rounds, and the judges gave it to Ali by unanimous decision, though it was closer than anyone expected. But Ali won. He won honestly, fighting every round with everything he had, knowing that mob money wasn't riding on him losing, knowing that he'd stood up to threats that would have broken most men. After the fight, in the press conference, a reporter asked Ali if he'd had any unusual challenges preparing for the bout. Ali just smiled that famous smile and said, Every fight has challenges, but you face them. You don't run from them. Only Angelo Dundee and a few others knew what had really happened in that dressing room. They never spoke about it publicly during Ali's fighting career. The story remained a closely guarded secret. But Carmine Rossetti's life changed that night. Over the next year, he began pulling back from his illegal operations. He stopped fixing fights, stopped threatening people, stopped building his empire on fear. By 1978, he'd essentially retired from the mob life, quietly managing a legitimate casino and living off his savings. He never spoke to Muhammad Ali again. But according to people close to him, Rossetti kept a photograph on his desk, a famous picture of Ali in the ring, fist raised in victory. When people asked why, he'd just say, that's a reminder of what real power looks like. In 1982, Rossetti wrote a letter to Ali. In it, he said, You saved my life that night in Las Vegas. Not with your fists, but with your words. You show me that I'd spent 58 years living wrong. I can't undo all the damage I've done, but I can try to be better for whatever time I have left. Thank you for not being afraid of me. Thank you for showing me what courage really means. You're the greatest fighter I ever met, but more importantly, you're the greatest man I ever met. Ali kept that letter. Years later, when Parkinson's had taken his voice and his movement, his daughter Layla found it in a box of Ali's personal papers. She asked her father if he wanted to talk about it. Ali couldn't speak easily anymore, but he managed to say, "Everybody deserves a second chance. Even mobsters." The story of what happened in that MGM grand dressing room remained largely unknown for decades. It wasn't until after Ali's death in 2016 that Angelo Dundee's memoir revealed the full details. The boxing world was stunned. "We all knew Ali was brave in the ring," one sports journalist wrote. But this was a different kind of courage. This was standing up to a man with a gun, refusing to be controlled, and somehow turning a potentially deadly situation into a moment of transformation for everyone involved. The story sparked conversations about Ali's impact beyond boxing. Yes, he was the greatest fighter of all time. Yes, he stood up to the government during Vietnam. Yes, he became a global icon. But the story of Carmine Rossetti showed something else about Ali: his ability to see the humanity in everyone, even his enemies. His refusal to meet violence with violence. His conviction that words and principles could be more powerful than weapons. Muhammad Ali taught us that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit. A philosopher wrote in an essay about the incident, "It's about how firmly you can stand for what's right, even when everything says you should back down." Most people, faced with a mobster pointing a gun at them, would have complied. Ali did the opposite. He escalated. He confronted. And in doing so, he saved not just his own integrity, but possibly Rossetti's soul. The story also raised questions about how many other moments like this happened in Ali's life. Moments where he stood up to power, refused to be controlled, used his words to change hearts and minds. How many times had Ali faced down threats, changed someone's life, made the world a little better, without seeking recognition or publicity? That's what made Ali truly great, Angelo Dundee said in an interview before his own death in 2012. It wasn't just about the fights he won. It was about the stands he took, the times he refused to compromise, the people he changed just by being unshakably, unapologetically himself. Muhammad Ali faced many opponents in his life. In the ring, he fought and defeated the toughest boxers in history. Outside the ring, he fought racism, injustice, and his own physical decline. But perhaps his most important fights were the ones nobody saw, the moments when he stood alone against people who thought they could break him. Carmine Rossetti thought a gun would be enough. He thought threats and violence could control Muhammad Ali. He thought wrong, because you can't threaten someone who values their principles more than their life. You can't control someone who's willing to die rather than compromise who they are. That's what made Muhammad Ali unbreakable. Not his chin, not his ability to absorb punishment in the ring, but his absolute refusal to be anything less than himself. His unwavering commitment to standing up for what he believed was right. The night in that Las Vegas dressing room, Ali showed that real power doesn't come from weapons or threats. It comes from integrity, from courage, from the willingness to look death in the face and say, "I won't bend. I won't break. I won't be controlled." And in showing that to Carmine Rossetti, Ali did something even more powerful than winning a fight. He changed a life. He took a man who'd built an empire on fear and violence and showed him a different way to live. A better way. That's the real legacy of Muhammad Ali. Not the championships, not the fame, but the countless lives he touched and changed just by being unwilling to compromise who he was. Carmine Rossetti died in 1995. His obituary made no mention of his mob connections or his years of illegal activity. It described him as a Las Vegas businessman who dedicated his later years to supporting youth programs and helping people get second chances. At his funeral, someone left a boxing glove with a note attached. "The greatest knockout is the one that saves a life." A fan, Muhammad Ali never publicly took credit for Rossetti's transformation. He never told the story himself, never used it to enhance his own legend. That wasn't his style. He just lived his life, stood for his principles, and let his actions speak louder than any words he could say. But those who knew the truth understood. That night in Las Vegas, Muhammad Ali defeated his most dangerous opponent. Not with his fists, but with his courage. Not by fighting, but by refusing to break. That's what it means to be the greatest, not just in the ring, but in life.